For this second section of this unit, we are going to be looking at the art of the Italian Renaissance to help us kind of better understand why the Renaissance in Italy was such an impactful event. So, to start looking at the art, we want to talk about some of the vocabulary that we'll use when we're describing and examining the different pieces. So, the first term that we want to be familiar with is the term medium. And what a medium is in art is it describes the materials used to create a piece. The materials used to create a piece. So, examples of mediums that we would see in art would be like if you're looking at the screen, different types of paints, clay, um, whatever it is that you are using to create that particular piece. In the Italian Renaissance, the most common mediums we are going to see is marble and bronze. Both of those materials were commonly used for sculptures. And then with painting, we see oil paints frequently used, as well as a technique we're going to be looking at here in a moment that's called fresco. So those are the different types of mediums that we will be seeing within our Italian Renaissance section. The second vocabulary term we want to be familiar with is what's called subject matter. Now, subject matter is what the particular art piece is focusing on or depicting. So, the subject matter is in these two particular pieces I have on the screen. You can see the one is showing a bunch of fruit on a plate. So that would be more or less like a still life type of subject matter where you're painting or focusing on everyday items. And then we also have here a piece that was created by the artist Andy Warhol in the 1960s that used the subject matter of Marilyn Monroe. So this would be what we would call a portrait, where it is a piece that highlights an individual or depicting that individual. So subject matter is what is the piece showcasing? What is it about? A patron is a individual that gives money to artists. Now, traditionally, in this time period, patrons would be individuals that would finance the artists being able to do their art. So they would oftentimes say, I would like a piece about blank, whatever it was that they were, interested in. And then the artist would create that piece using funds that the patron would give them, part of which they would pay up front. And then when the piece was done, the patron would pay the other part of what they owed the artist, and then they would get to take the piece. Today, traditionally, art patrons operate by going in and purchasing the art after it is created at galleries and things like that. But both ways work. So an art patron is someone that buys or funds the creation of art. Buys or funds the creation of art. And one of the most popular art patrons of the Italian Renaissance was the picture there in the bottom right corner, which is a picture of a member of the Medici family. We mentioned them before in section 1, the Medicis. They were going to be popular art patrons in this time because they were a very wealthy trading family, and this was one of the things they liked to invest in, and what is really one of the things that spurred the Italian Renaissance. The fourth term we want to talk about is one of the mediums that I mentioned before, which is called fresco. And fresco is a type of art where the painting is done on fresh, wet plaster, painting is done on fresh, wet plaster using water-based paints. Done on fresh, wet plaster using water-based paints. So this was a technique that was very common in this time period. You can see two examples of fresco painting where literally they're painting directly onto the wall, and then they would moisten the wall by putting fresh plaster down, and then they would take their paints and basically go in while the plaster was still wet and be painting right on that surface. And then as the plaster dried, it would kind of seal in the colors of the paint and the what they were creating. So there are many frescoes that were done in a lot of these older churches from the Renaissance time period, or right on, walls within different buildings and structures in Italy. So the fresco painting was a really interesting style and medium that was used in this time period. So we'll see a bunch of fresco paintings from this time. And then the last term that we want to mention is the term naturalism. Naturalism. And naturalism was a style where the subject matter highlights the natural environment. Subject matter highlights the natural environment. So this is where oftentimes the artist would pay careful attention to the surrounding environment, the natural world around us. And so in these particular pieces, you see animals, you'll see big kind of landscapes, careful attention paid to the trees and the plants and the water and the rocks and all of those types of things that we would see outside. And this was a common kind of subject matter that we saw kind of inserted within these pieces of the Italian Renaissance. So that's some vocabulary that's going to help us. So next, you're going to watch the video about the artist Giotto.